have a very special guest, Steve Forbes, Chairman, Editor-in-Chief, Forbes Media. Steve Forbes, thank you for being with us.
Good to be with you.
Inauguration Day just days away. What kind of policies? I know you're excited about some of the changes that could happen. I mean, first 100 days, what better happen?
Well, I think he is going to lead off probably right after he takes the oath of office. He'll just walk away, go to a room and start signing executive orders undoing the damaging ones that Joe Biden did, starting with energy. But the key thing in the first 100 days is to get introduced in Congress a mammoth, big, beautiful tax cut. Not only renewing the tax cuts of 2017, but also reducing tax rates. Not just on the corporate side to 15%, but with Steve Moore, I co-authored a piece for the Journal, Wall Street Journal, proposing that we have a flat tax of 15%. They won't do it this round, but that should be the ultimate goal. And one thing they should add is reducing the capital gains tax. The nice thing about that, it's a twofer. Not only do you get more investment, but also it raises revenue from day one because people are more likely to realize gains when you don't get punished as much. Every time the capital gains tax levy has been reduced, guess what happens? Revenues immediately go up.
What about the folks who say these are all things for the rich people? You're giving tax breaks to corporations, capital gains taxes when you want to cut them, flat tax. How does it help everybody in America by doing this?
Well, first of all, in the 2017 tax cut, they doubled the exemption. Today, with inflation, it's now $30,000 per couple. And what that has done is reduce the number of people who file deductions from 40% of the filings to less than 10%. So you've simplified the code for millions of people. Everyone got a tax cut with that 2017 bill, and everyone's going to get a cut with this new one if they do it right. So if you want the economy to expand, you reduce the tax burden on everyone, and you reduce the price of doing things like productive work, risk-taking, and success. It worked for Reagan, worked for Kennedy in the 60s, worked in the 20s. Lower the burden, and guess what? We all prosper.
And look, you're seeing oil now creeping higher, getting closer to $80. You mentioned energy front and center. What about what people pay at the pump? Some of the energy plans to be energy independent. That was always something that was on his agenda.
Well, that's one of the key things the Biden administration is trying to do. They still have this fetish, this fantasy that oil and gas cause all sorts of bad weather, acne, and God knows what else. But the fact of the matter is, those things will be undone, and we will be allowed to export natural gas. China has to import energy. So whether they buy it directly from us or through a third party, they will be dependent on the U.S. for future energy if we fully unleash the energy industry here. That's not a bad position to be in.
Do you think, and that's true, you're absolutely right, if that actually is the case and they decide to choose our offerings at that time. When you think about what China's doing, I mean, right now you have, deflationary environment. People are watching China bonds. They're trying to step back and maybe boost their yields there. But China's not growing at the same rate that it used to. You have other countries that are growing faster, right, like India and such. Where does China fit in? Are we worried about, trade wars and things like that? Even today, we're talking about the chips, and, that puts pressure on our chip names. Tell me a little bit about where China fits into the picture.
Well, China fits in because under Xi Jinping, it's taken a very aggressive attitude, militarily, geopolitically, which they didn't do before. And as a matter of fact, his predecessors, especially Deng Xiaoping, back in the 80s, warned, don't do anything crazy internationally until at least 2050. 2049, the 100th anniversary of the Communist Revolution. Xi Jinping wants to do it now. So he's roiling everything in Asia and around the world. And he's building a major port in Peru, which can be easily converted to a naval base. So that kind of aggressiveness is going to get a response from this administration. They realize appeasement doesn't work. And in terms of tariffs, the key thing is to use tariffs as a tactic, as a tool, not as a permanent thing. Tariffs are a tax, and we don't need new taxes. So I hope the new president goes ahead and uses those to reduce trade barriers, which will benefit us as well as the rest of the world. And by the way, when Reagan did things right in the 1980s, guess what happened on the tax cut side? within a few years of his big tax cuts, 50 nations around the world followed America's example. Success begets success.
So the tariffs will be used more for trade
That's the hope.
Establish trade, maybe also the pressure on illegal immigration.
Yeah,
or,
with our
like
friends to the north and south, yes. So let's get control of the border.
I think Trump actually invited Xi Jinping to the inauguration. Did he not?
Yes.
I think he did. I don't think he's coming. But I thought that was sort of...
It'll be interesting to see who Xi Jinping gives us tickets to.
Yeah, right, without a doubt. What do you think about the Trump administration, all the people that he's putting in the cabinet, all the names that he named so quickly? Was there anybody who stands out to you that you really like a lot?
Well, I can tell you his proposal for the labor secretary, former congresswoman from Oregon, is one that when the union's leaders, like the head of the teachers union, praises, you know you got a problem. So I hope they make a change there. The others are coming up with hearings. I think most of them will get through, although they'll go through the usual congressional gauntlet and kabuki dancing of shaking fists or whatever they do over there. So I think most of them will get through.
I want to move on to a few other topics, but just to circle back for a moment, when it comes to the taxes and the corporate tax rate, where do you think that it will be in the Trump administration? Where do you think it'll be cut down to?
Well, it's at 21% now. He wants to do it to 15% for domestic companies. I don't know how they're going to do the language on that. But if you get it down to 15, that again will be extremely beneficial for the economy. Again, raising more revenue. When you look at the revenue streams of the first Trump administration, the problem wasn't a revenue problem. The problem has always been in Washington a spending problem. But by stimulating the economy, revenues came in above expectations when you allow people to do productive things. So I hope they not only get the corporate rate down to 15, but in terms of the concern about the SALT deduction, state and local taxes, instead of monkeying around with that, slash tax rates. That's the best. That stimulates the economy as well as enable people to keep more of what they create.
Do you have concerns about bond yields higher for longer?
Well, the bond yields are higher
right
because of uncertainty. We know that the U.S. Treasury has got huge financing needs coming up and refinancing as well. And bond markets want to see what happens with the tax bill, what happens on tariffs. There are a lot of uncertainties floating out there. But as you pointed out with the 100 days, if it looks like things are going in a very pro-growth direction, I think bond yields will taper off a little bit. And in terms of the rest of the world, that's where the real problem is. Governments went on a binge of debt since 2008 because of artificially low rates. It's like if you added $10,000 to your credit card and your monthly payment went down. That's in effect what happened with governments. And so what was not to like until rates went up again. So you're going to have to deal with crisis there. And all of this, the best antidote is growth.
Do you feel like Americans will feel good in the next few years? Because when there was a survey, it showed more Americans than not felt better about the years ahead. But more Americans obviously voted for Trump. So there was this divide within that survey that I'm referring to. It was more Republicans. And the Democrats didn't feel so good. Will everybody feel good, do you think? I mean... Well,
if they get their program through and the economy is humming along, that puts people in a better mood. You know, Billy Beane, the legendary head of the Oakland Athletics, subject of a movie with Brad Pitt, liked to say when asked about what do you do about bad morale in the locker room? Start winning games and the mood changes.
And there
Start
you go.
having a better economy, the mood changes.
It's so simple, right? We have a very strong dollar. It's been creeping higher. Your thoughts on the strong dollar situation, especially for the multinationals?
Well, you have a strange situation there. The dollar is going up against the yen, the euro, and pound, and the like. But the dollar is not doing so well against gold, not doing so well against a broad index of commodities, which is a sign of shakiness. So all the currencies in the world are suspect. Ours just happens to be far less suspect than the others, which means our friends at the Federal Reserve have got to get over their crazy notion that prosperity causes inflation. They should focus on a stable value for the dollar. So the gold price doesn't change. And commodity as a whole, commodity indexes as a whole don't change. You have fluctuations in between.
Yeah.
But the past signs of inflation are starting to get a little shaky again. But the problem is the Fed doesn't know what it's doing, which means there are going to be new officials there.
I'm going to let that breathe for a second because I was going to ask you about the Fed, and I know you haven't been very happy with the Fed, and the credibility of the Fed is at stake now, and we are likely to see, according to our dot plots and such, 2 cuts, not 4 cuts. Do those happen? What should the Fed be doing?
The Fed should stop manipulating interest rates, which is a form of rent control. You know, in the old days when you borrowed money, it was called renting the money. Rent control means renting an apartment, but also means renting the money. So instead of trying to guide the economy, oh, it shouldn't grow above this rate, or trying to get it down to another rate, leave it alone. Let the market set the rents for money, just as you want to do in real estate. So the Fed should say their focus is on a stable value for the dollar, preserve the integrity of the dollar. That's what they should focus on.
Let's talk about what Trump may step in on other topics that are hot topics. For example, the TikTok ban, which you have the Supreme Court now with the potential ban. If they allow the ban, what kind of broad consequences that may happen. He has said he doesn't want TikTok to go away. Does he step in and somehow save TikTok?
I don't think TikTok is going to go away. What you may see happen is some changes in the ownership. More and more transparency and the like, but trying to make sure TikTok in Beijing is not doing things they shouldn't do. But it's not going to disappear, but the way perhaps it's structured is going to change.
Also, I heard this morning, I believe on the radio I heard it, that President Donald Trump, was looking at New York City congestion pricing. You're a New Yorker. It's a bone of contention. Yes, it went into play. It's less than what it was originally. But he said if it's in his power, he's going to take a look. And he obviously doesn't like it. What do you think? You think when you hear about something, it's a New York story, but it's a big business story.
Well, it's typical of what's happened in New York, not to mention states like Illinois, New Jersey, and California. They seem to be doing everything possible to wreck their economies, everything possible to shove people out of the state. And so, the congestion pricing starts low. Remember, the federal income tax started at 7%, and look what happened to that. So those things always have a way of creeping up. So this is going to hurt businesses in New York. It's going to hurt New York City itself. And you would hope that someday they'll get governance in New York that actually focuses on opportunity rather than trying to shake down taxpayers and drive the state into the ground. You know, New York was once called the Empire State, which meant it was a big, great, growing state, largest in the country, most powerful in the country. Today it's a shadow of what it once was.
Yeah, understood. All right, just a quick thought on the LA fires and the economy, GDP, how that may factor in.
Well, obviously, there's going to be a price to pay because a lot of people are going to need real help and real help fast. But it underscores, too, the misgovernance in California. Why wasn't that underbrush taken care of? Why does California flush half of its water into the Pacific Ocean each year?
Well, how will this affect GDP and such?
GDP will take a slight hit. But the key thing is, if you get better governance in the largest state in the union, we'll all benefit, not just Californians.
Well, we benefit that you were here with us today, Steve Forbes.
Well, thank you.
It's great to see you always. Steve Forbes, Chairman, Editor-in-Chief at Forbes Media. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so very much.